Have you ever imagined just being able to say no to a king?
Oh, yeah.
Well, our subject today basically did just that.
Wow.
Multiple times.
Wow.
Anne-Marie Louise d'Orléans,
Yeah.
Duchess of Montpensier,
Okay.
the wealthiest woman in 17th century France.
Wow.
Her story is crazy.
I bet.
Defying expectations,
Yeah.
navigating the French court, and even commanding cannons in a civil war.
Oh, wow.
So,
This is going to be good.
yeah, buckle up because we're diving deep into the life of this real-life princess warrior.
It is interesting because her life, it really challenges the typical image of a princess from that era.
Yeah.
You know, she was born into incredible privilege, but
Right.
it was combined with a lot of hardship,
Right.
starting with a really tragic loss right from the beginning.
Right. Today's deep dive is exploring that fascinating mix of privilege and hardship.
Yeah.
And we're using the Noble Blood podcast episode,
Okay.
A Rebel Heiress in the French Royal Family,
Oh, okay.
as our guide today.
They do a fantastic job of setting the scene.
Yep.
Anne-Marie was born in 1627 to Gaston, Duke of Orleans, the brother of King Louis XIII,
Okay.
making her the king's niece, right at the heart of the French court.
Okay, so we've got the royal lineage.
Yeah.
But I think what's key here is her mother, Marie de Bourbon,
Yes.
unbelievably wealthy,
Yeah.
inheriting a massive fortune from the Montpensier family.
Wow.
But tragically, she died just days after Anne-Marie's birth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's what made Anne-Marie's position so unique. Even as a newborn, she became the sole heir to this vast estate, giving her a level of independence that was almost unheard of, even for royalty.
Royalty.
This inheritance wasn't just about money, it was about power,
Right.
the freedom to make her own choices. In a world where women were often just pawns in political games.
It's almost hard to imagine, right?
Yeah.
This tiny baby,
Yeah.
suddenly one of the most powerful figures in France.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what a heavy burden to carry,
Yes.
losing your mother like that,
Yeah.
even with all the riches in the world.
Absolutely. That theme of privilege mixed with loss really echoes throughout her entire life.
Yeah.
Imagine growing up in the Palais des Tuileries, surrounded by luxury, but also feeling the absence of her mother keenly.
There's this story from her childhood that I think kind of sums up her unique position.
Okay.
She apparently started calling the future King Louis XIV, who was her cousin, her petite husband.
Oh.
That sounds adorable.
Yeah. But in the context of the French court, it was a political minefield.
Right.
King Louis XIII might have found it amusing, but his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, saw the potential for trouble. He recognized the inherent power dynamics at play and quickly separated the two.
So even as a child, she was already stirring the pot.
Yeah.
And this independent streak really comes into play later on when she starts receiving marriage proposals from some of the most eligible bachelors in Europe.
We're not talking about just any suitors.
Right.
These were figures like the future Charles II of England and even the Holy Roman Emperor. Marrying Anne-Marie wasn't just about romance. It was about forging powerful alliances that could shift the balance of power across the continent.
And she turned them all down.
Wow.
What does that tell us about her?
Yeah.
Why refuse what seemed like incredibly advantageous matches?
Right.
It's not like she was lacking in wealth or status.
That's the question that gets to the heart of who Anne-Marie was.
Yeah.
It speaks to her incredible will and her determination to forge her own path.
Wow.
She wasn't content to be a pawn in anyone's game,
Right.
even if it meant defying societal expectations. And the pressure to secure a politically expedient marriage?
Yeah.
She wanted more.
She definitely wasn't one to sit back and let life happen to her.
No.
And that independent spirit really shines
Yeah.
during a tumultuous period in French history,
Okay.
known as the Fronde.
The Fronde was a series of uprisings against the monarchy, and it was a messy, complicated affair. You had nobles feeling like the monarchy was overstepping its bounds, and you had the crown trying to maintain control amidst all these challenges.
Right.
Anne-Marie, who initially didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation, gets thrown right into the thick of it.
And this is where we see her transition from princess to, well, warrior princess.
Exactly.
There's this incredible scene where she's in Orleans, acting on behalf of her father.
Her father, being the Duke of Orleans, had a major stake in the city, which itself held a strategic position. When Anne-Marie arrived, expecting a warm welcome, she was met with fear.
Oh.
The city officials, terrified of being caught in the crossfire between the rebels and the monarchy, refused to open the gates.
But if there's one thing we know about Anne-Marie, it's that she doesn't back down easily.
No.
She wasn't going to be deterred by a closed gate.
Exactly. She found some boatmen willing to help her break down a different gate, and while they were doing that, she climbed a hill to get a better view of the city.
Can you imagine her ladies-in-waiting?
Oh my God.
They must have been terrified, begging her to come down.
I know.
Talk about making a statement.
That's incredible.
This event really marks her emergence as a political force in her own right. Someone willing to take risks and challenge the status quo.
Oh, this is just the beginning.
Okay.
The real drama unfolds when she returns to Paris, and the Fronde reaches a boiling point. But before we get into that, I think it's worth pausing to consider what we've learned about Anne-Marie so far.
I agree. What stands out to you about her in these early years? What's the key takeaway for you?
Let me think. I think for me, it's her resilience.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Think about it. Losing her mother at birth, growing up surrounded by power, but also experiencing a sense of isolation, and then having to navigate the complexities of court politics.
Right.
She could have easily become withdrawn or resentful, but instead she developed this fierce independence, unwavering determination.
It's like that early loss forced her to create her own path, to rely on herself.
Exactly. She couldn't afford to be a passive princess. She had to be an active player in the game.
Precisely.
Right.
And that brings us to the heart of the Fronde, where we see her most daring act.
Okay.
The Fronde, at its core, was a power struggle between the nobles and the monarchy, with each side vying for control.
And Anne-Marie, with her deep ties to both sides, found herself in a situation that would test her courage and leadership like never before.
Exactly.
It all went down at the Bastille.
Oh, wow.
And let me tell you, it involved cannons and a whole lot of drama.
Picture this. If a Prince de Condé, a key figure in the Fronde, is leading the rebellion against the royal forces. Anne-Marie's father, Gaston, has sided with Condé, and Anne-Marie is fully on board.
Wow.
In fact, she saw this as a chance to potentially claim the throne for herself.
Wow, so the stakes were incredibly high.
Very.
And then one night, Anne-Marie has this feeling that something big is about to happen.
She refuses to take any medicine, wanting to stay alert. And sure enough, in the early hours of the morning, news arrives. Condé's forces are under attack, trapped outside the city walls.
Oh, no.
They desperately need help.
Gaston, however, claims to be too ill to go, but he gives Anne-Marie permission to act on his behalf.
So she goes.
She rushes to the city militia, pleading with them to open the gates and allow Condé's troops into Paris for safety.
Okay.
But the militia, hesitant to get involved in the conflict, refuses.
But Anne-Marie was not going to take no for an answer.
No.
She basically threatens the Marshal of France, telling him to open the gates or face the consequences.
Wow.
And shockingly, it works.
Now here's where the real drama unfolds. Anne-Marie goes to the Bastille, climbs to the top of a tower where there's a telescope, and witnesses the unfolding chaos. Royal troops are preparing for a final assault on Condé's forces.
Oh, wow.
It's a do-or-die moment.
And this is where Anne-Marie takes charge, doing something no one expected from a princess.
At that time, the Bastille's cannons were facing inward, towards the city, in a brilliant strategic move. Anne-Marie orders the cannons to be turned around and aimed at the advancing royal troops.
What a power move.
I know, right?
And to think she did all this without consulting anyone? She saw what needed to be done and took action?
It was a pivotal moment. The cannons fire, halting the royal army in its tracks, and Condé's forces are able to retreat safely into Paris.
Wow!
Anne-Marie, in that instant, becomes a hero to the rebels.
I can almost hear the cannons booming.
I know.
The smoke filling the air. And there she is, atop the Bastille, having just saved the day. It's an incredible image.
It really is. But as with all historical turning points, the aftermath is rarely simple.
Right.
The Fronde ultimately fails.
Okay.
And Anne-Marie faces the consequences of her actions. She's exiled from court, forced to live away from the center of power.
It's a bittersweet victory, isn't it?
It is.
She proves her strength and courage, but pays a price for it.
What's fascinating is that during this period of exile, she delves deeply into her writing.
And it's in her writing that we get a glimpse into her inner world.
Right.
Her thoughts on society, marriage, what it meant to be a woman in 17th century France.
Right.
Her memoirs provide a unique perspective, not just on her own life, but on the world around her.
I remember reading about her vision for a utopian society.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds incredibly progressive for its time.
It really is. She envisioned a rural retreat, a place filled with books, music, and good food.
Okay.
But here's the catch. No married couples allowed.
What?
She believed that marriage put women at a disadvantage, making them subservient to men.
Right.
In her utopia, women would be their own mistresses, free from the constraints of traditional roles.
It's such a powerful statement about her desire for female autonomy and agency.
It is.
But it also highlights the limitations she faced in her own life,
Yeah.
despite her wealth and status.
Exactly. She could dream of this ideal world. But in reality, she was still bound by the expectations and structures of her time. And despite her initial aversion to marriage, she eventually falls in love, finding herself swept up in a whirlwind romance that unfortunately doesn't have a fairy tale ending.
That's the part with Antoine Nompart de Caumont, the Duke of Lauzon, right?
Yes.
For it's quite a heartbreaking story.
It is. Their relationship is a fascinating exploration of love, power, and betrayal within the French court.
Okay.
It's a story that reveals a lot about the complexities of Anne-Marie's character and the challenges she faced as a woman who dared to defy convention.
So we left off with Anne-Marie back in Paris after her exile. She's in her 40s. She's navigated political turmoil, turned down kings and emperors, and then enters Antoine Nompart de Caumont, the Duke of Lauzon.
Yeah.
What was it about this guy that captivated her?
Well, Lauzon was a compelling figure in his own right. He was a favorite of King Louis XIV, known for his wit and charm.
Yeah.
He was also incredibly ambitious, coming from a less wealthy noble family, and saw the royal court as his stage for social climbing.
And Anne-Marie, after all her talk of female independence and rejecting the institution of marriage, falls for him.
Right.
It seems almost out of character.
Well, it's a reminder that even the most independent spirits can be vulnerable to love's allure.
Right.
In her memoirs, Anne-Marie describes a deep connection with Lauzon, finding his conversation extraordinary.
Interesting.
And remember, she spent years surrounded by people playing political games.
Right.
Perhaps with Lauzon, she felt seen and understood in a way she hadn't experienced before.
So there's genuine affection, but this is the French court, so I'm guessing it wasn't smooth sailing.
You guessed right. Anne-Marie was a princess, a relative of the king,
Right.
marrying a minor nobleman. Even when favored by the king was a huge scandal.
And to add fuel to the fire, Anne-Marie was the one who initiated the relationship, the pursuer in this romance.
Oh, wow.
That was unheard of for a woman, let alone a princess in that era.
It really flips the script on traditional courtship.
Yeah.
And while King Louis XIV was initially hesitant, he eventually gave his blessing, much to the shock and disapproval of the court.
I can only imagine the gossip that must have generated.
Oh, absolutely. People saw Anne-Marie as this tragic, unmarried figure and couldn't fathom that Lauzon's feelings were genuine.
Right.
The prevailing assumption was that he was just using her for her wealth and influence.
Which, knowing what happens next, seems like a fair assumption.
Right. Just days after announcing the engagement, King Louis XIV abruptly withdrew his consent.
Wow.
The exact reason remains a mystery, but some believe he was pressured by powerful figures at court, or perhaps realized that Lauzon wasn't a suitable match for Anne-Marie after all.
And Anne-Marie was left heartbroken.
Yes.
But she didn't give up easily, did she?
Not at all. She spent years trying to secure Lauzon's release from prison, where he landed for an unrelated offense.
Oh.
She even struck a deal with the king's mistress, Madame de Montespan, agreeing to make Montespan's illegitimate son her heir if the king would release Lauzon.
That's an incredible sacrifice.
It is.
She really put everything on the line for him. Did he finally realize her worth and commit to their relationship?
Unfortunately, it wasn't the fairy tale ending one might hope for.
Right.
While Lauzon was eventually released, he seemed more focused on regaining the king's favor than marrying Anne-Marie.
Wow.
He even engaged in multiple affairs while she waited for him.
What a betrayal after everything she did for him.
It's a painful realization. Eventually, Anne-Marie sees Lauzon for what he is, a swindler, as she called him in her memoirs.
Wow.
She cut off all contact with him.
So what becomes of Anne-Marie after all of this?
She returns to Paris, dedicates herself to her writing, and finds solace in her faith. She dies in 1693 at the age of 66 without an heir. Her vast fortune passes on to other relatives.
It's a somewhat melancholic end. For a woman who had so much wealth and potential, to leave her mark on history, it feels like her story is often overshadowed by the grandeur of the French monarchy itself.
It's a reminder that even lives filled with privilege and extraordinary experiences don't always guarantee happiness or a straightforward legacy. Anne-Marie's story raises compelling questions about love, power, societal expectations. and the choices we make in the face of them.
Her life was a complex tapestry of defying expectations and grappling with the realities of her time. Anne-Marie's story leaves us with a lot to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating life of Anne-Marie Louise d'Orléans. If you enjoyed this exploration of history, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more captivating journeys into the past, present, and future.